Jay. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio, your weekly source for tribal and community news, interesting guests and discussions, plus a local events calendar. SJ, Stongo, Gary Fife, Jahu Jifgedos. Welcome to Mvskoke Radio here on the Brew in windy, cloudy Okmulgee here today. We'll be sharing a couple of things. First of all, we have Brandon Harper from the language department to talk about some of the activities they've got, including a storytelling event coming up, and other ways to get people involved in using and working with our language. And in the second segment of our show, we will have some of the opening arguments in a water rights case between the Navajo Nation and the United States and Arizona. Those kind of things are important because you set precedent with one federal relationship, then somebody's going to pull a stunt and use it on you again. So we want to hear what they've got to say. It is excerpts of the opening arguments, so we won't get you involved with the whole legalese sort of thing, which can be kind of, well, let's admit it, it can be kind of boring, but I think it's important enough for us to excerpt and share. But let's get on with our language. Good morning, Brandon. We appreciate you making time to come in and talk with us.
What do?
And you can talk a little more if you want.
Brandon Barnett.
Barnett, what did I say, Harper?
Yeah.
No, that's our managing editor. We have the flyer here talking about an event coming up very soon about storytelling. That's one of the many activities that the language department's involved with. But let's just start there. First of all, kind of give me a capsule of what the department does. What's your mission?
Our mission is to preserve the language through technology, document it, archive it for our library, to talk to the elders, get their stories. It could be anything they choose, their upbringing, their families, their school, their military experience, just anything they want to talk about, as long as it's in the language. And we want to touch on the pandemic and how that's affected Indian communities and the elders that we are losing because of this, and the language that we are losing. And so our goal is to preserve as much of the language as we can, be it hymns, stories, jokes, and anything that they want to talk about. That's what we're striving for.
Every member of your department I've spoken with have always emphasized the fact that we're losing so many fluent speakers. The use of the language is at a critical point, I'd say. And how would you describe it if you were going to talk about how we're doing in that struggle to keep it alive?
I would categorize it as a 911 situation. I think we're at a critical crossroads in our history. The language, as everybody knows, is going away. It's dying. And seems like every week, every month, we're losing more and more speakers. And these speakers are valuable to our existence, our identity. This is what gives us our identity as far as Native people, the Mvskoke people. They brought the language over on the trail, and it was like a keepsake. It was like an antiquity. It's very valuable. The language is a living, breathing entity. It's like a member of your family. You have to take care of it. You have to practice it. You have to perpetuate it every day, every night of your life. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Right now, I am still pretty much a beginner in language, and find myself working a word or two into my daily discussions around the office, or even teaching my Ojibwe wife a little bit of Mvskoke there, and having some pride in being able to recall. Thinking, yeah, I remember this, and whoops, I forgot that, and this kind of thing. But enough to get myself fed and agreed by elders.
Yeah.
So that's, to me, was encouraging personally. It's a personal goal I've set for myself to become somewhat conversational in a language. Now, in the years that I've watched classes and participation, it seemed like there is sort of a steady interest, and people of all ages, and including elders who already speak it and are learning to read and write, to young college kids who recognize the value and the pride they can have. Not just me on the outside watching it. Now, what have you, as a staff member, been able to see as far as a renewed interest in the language?
I think there's a lot of interest. Our Facebook page, we maintain a lot of people from all over the world, to tell you the truth, tune into our videos and our information. Our language calendar we just printed and sent out went all over the world, to tell you the truth. There was some international addresses, and some of these people tune into our Zoom classes, and so it's just not here in the reservation, it's worldwide.
We had Melinda Suckhofer in last year from Scotland, and has Mvskoke heritage in her family there. And of course, she went overseas, but she says she works at keeping it alive for herself and sharing it with the other European folks that she deals with. Not that anyone's going to be fluent over there, but it's interesting to see her interest. And of course, she toured our tribal campus and the First Americans Museum and things like that. So she was fairly, let's call it, competent in some of the basic phrases and exchanges. So I thought, my God, we are sort of winning the battle, kind of so to speak. I don't know, is that something you'd agree with? Have you seen that sort of evidence?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of renewed interest. A lot of people that didn't practice it or try to learn it, I think they're coming around now. Native people always been proud. It's something that we're taught as when we're very young. But the media, we had to overcome some of the stereotypes in the media, movies. But nowadays, we're still proud. We're still proud of our language and our clan history, all of our histories, and I just think people are just more open to learning. If it's like you said, if it's a word here or there, at the dinner table or at school or work or anything. If everybody tries, check out our Facebook page. We pride ourselves in what we call everyday living. So there's something on there for everybody. Sitting at the dinner table and talking to your children, doing yard work, going fishing, all the things that we like to do. We have seemed like we've touched on a lot of that. So there's something in there for everybody.
My wife gets kind of a kick out of it when I can pull out a word or two. Driving up and down the highway, she's learned the words kunu and fumbi.
Oh, sure, yeah. Side of the road.
Yeah. And drive through it and it stays with you for a while. Now, the event we've got coming up right now is a real exercise in using the language and combining that with heritage and common practice. It's involving the telling of stories.
Yes, this will be our second year of this project. We are recruiting fluent speakers to come talk to me, and I'll videotape them and create a video out of it, which we will post on our YouTube page for later. And we've had numerous speakers come talk to us, and they talk about all types of subjects, all types of information, which is great because you get to hear some of the traditionals. You get to hear Christianity. You get to hear just a vast array of information, and it's great. It's like the best of both worlds. And so yeah, this storytelling event is we're very proud of it, and we're looking forward to April 1st in Mvskoke at the community center.
When I saw this flyer, first of all, I thought, well, what have we got here? You know, it's like a circle of speakers sitting around, you know, just talking. And now you're mentioning videotapes, so is it like individual interviews? So what have you got lined up here?
Yeah, but they talk to me one-on-one, and I'll ask them questions, and they'll, like I said, they'll talk about whatever they like, and they'll tell me stories, or like I said, jokes or anything, and some talk about their military careers and things, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of information, and there's something in there for everybody. And so if you check out our YouTube page, check out our past interviews, they're great. They're just to sit there and listen to these speakers and in that language just to flow off their tongue just flawlessly, and which is very inspiring to hear and watch that. But it'll more than likely be a one-on-one situation, and if they talk amongst each other, I'll capture that as well. But it's more or less one-on-one.
Now, you mentioned a variety of subjects there. Now, when I first read this, I thought, what are we going to be dealing with? Is this going to be kind of a, Disney and Creek? You know, we're going to talk about, baby deer and, energy and people coming from the sky and that sort of thing. But what you're saying here is this more, I assume there'll be some of that, but more contemporary discussions. It's like you mentioned military and raising the family and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they'll talk about, for example, we was down in Hannah, and gentleman Thomas Lowe, he was, I'll just dive right into this. He was talking about Bigfoot and his experience with him and down there in Hannah area, and he was telling us amazing stories about his experience with Bigfoot, and which was amazing because he had these great stories and he told it in their language, and it was unbelievable. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and when he was telling me these stories. So yeah, there's new subjects and contemporary, but there's also the old school, the old ways. So it's very interesting is what it is. It's gonna be really good.
Now, you mentioned Hannah and the sightings of Bigfoot down there. I presume there's a word for that particular entity.
It's the Jupco.
It's the Jupco.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to pay attention. I go down every year to decorate family graves. So I'm going to have to pay more attention to what's going on. Now, as the storytelling event progresses, who's showing up to chat with you? Is it mostly elders, or is it?
It's mostly elders. I'm solidifying the lineup right as to tell you the truth as we speak. I don't want to give you any names right off the bat, but I'm shooting for 5 speakers. I'll have to go visit them today and tomorrow to get all the paperwork done and everything. But about 5 speakers is what I'm aiming for this April 1st.
Have you got any subject matter in mind, or is that something they bring with them?
No, I'll tell them, because usually they're nervous or apprehensive, and I'll just say, just talk to me like you're at church or you're in your living room, and if you want to tell me something about your mom or dad or your grandpa or something they said or anything that you want to talk about, whatever makes you comfortable. And when I do that, it sort of relaxes them, and then they put their guard down. And then once they start, then all this information comes out. It's just like a water faucet. It just comes out, And
That sounds familiar. A little chat I usually have with my guests here on the show. They come in all wound up.
yeah,
So, hey, you just talk about what you know and don't worry about everything else. So, yeah, we'll get it done. Now, that's the storytelling is by no means the only project that language is involved with. Give me an idea of some of the other things that you guys are looking at.
Oh, we're very happy to announce our Zoom sessions are in full swing. We have Mahaya Barnett teaching Zoom on Monday and Wednesdays at noon. We have our language camps coming up. That'll be happening in June 12th through the 15th. Sequoia Lodge, those are always fun. Get the kids around, we talk to them, and we teach them prayers and sounds, and it's great fun. It's especially children. They pick the language up so quick, and if you talk to them and tell them every day, you'll be surprised how much they pick up. And it's fascinating to watch them, because in some cases they'll remember things that you kind of forget, and they'll remind you of some words or whatever it is, and it's great fun to watch these kids interact with the language. And then we have arts and crafts, and then we'll bring in a Christian church, and then we'll bring in a traditional stomp dance grounds, and we expose them to all types of our culture.
Do they have any preference or more of an interest in one subject or another? A favorite, perhaps?
No, children are like sponges. They'll talk about, and they'll remember, and they're pretty open to a lot of subjects. Some of them like the stomp dance things, and a lot of them like the hymn singings, and so there's something there for everybody. We like to open it up, our subjects, and expose them to a lot of different types of our culture.
Now, what other things kind of are you all involved in?
Oh, wow! Just like I said, the Zoom classes. We're doing our Facebook. We're getting ready to launch our website. That's in the final stages. That's going to house all of our information. We're hoping to just branch out and just cover more ground. We would like more interaction on the Zoom. If you have ideas, we're open to ideas. You can give us a call or email us or something, and give us ideas or input. But yeah, we're just looking to expand on what's already there. It's really an honor. I think I have the best job in the nation, because I doing the media stuff. I get to see all aspects of our nation: the Christianity, the traditional, the art, the elders, the children. I mean, it's all encompassing, and it's really, for me, it's really an honor, to tell you the truth, to be a part of this language program, and I'm very happy to lend my expertise and my computer knowledge and to expand on what we're doing. I kind of look at it like my kids. I want them to see and hear things, after I'm gone, I want to leave things behind. So if they decide to want to listen to the language or hymns, or that I've already did that. I've already recorded it. I've already made the videos for it. Already, all these things, and that they can go to these websites and these places, and it's all there. It's all there for them. And so after I'm gone, that's what I want to leave behind for them. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I've listened to some of the CDs. I used to pop them into my machine on a drive to work or going home, and just simple repetition or work through it, and learn to count to 10.
Yeah, sure.
Man, fun stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you this one, and I'm not sure how you might take this, or our listeners might get it, but have you ever found yourself in a situation where you get into a, shall we say, heated discussion, perhaps an argument with a non-Mvskoke person about why we should spend the time and the effort in trying to relearn or retain what they might call a dead language or a dead culture? I mean, have you found yourself in those kind of situations?
I know exactly what you're saying, and there are people that believe that they'll say, "Why are you trying to save something that's going to die?" Or nobody understands you. Why would you perpetuate the language when nobody can understand what you're saying? And my response is, it's our responsibility. Like I said, the elders brought us over on the trail, and for us not to speak and not to learn and not to perpetuate, to me, is a disservice to our elders that came over on the trail, because they brought that here. And it's our identity. We are our tongue. That's our language. That's who we are as people. You talk to Spanish people. Their language is Spanish. When they start talking, you hear that Spanish language, and they're Spanish people, or Italians, or Germans, or French. When you hear their language, that's they're French or German. So when we speak, we're Stajati, we're Mvskoke, So I understand what you're saying, but I think it's a responsibility that we continue to try and save this language. It is dying, but we have the responsibility to try to save it and to keep it around, and to teach our children the best we can, and to keep it going. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and I was just asking for your opinion on it. So I feel the same way. It's like I have see no reason why we have to be complicit in watching it die.
Yeah.
And I have some feeble efforts here to improve my own self, but I can't see just kind of knowingly let something like this slip away from them. As we go along and interact with the rest of the nation and America, in my business, I talk to people from other tribes and things like that, and discover that different tribes around the country are adopting their own languages to deal with contemporary society. Whether it's translators in a hospital, telling patients what's going on, or the educational process, books in those languages. And one thing that I got a kick out of was I spoke with a guy out in Arizona who's a sports announcer, and he does their football games in Dene, and was talking about and forgive me, I forgot the word for touchdown, but a lot of things.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So what do you think when you hear that sort of thing?
I think that's amazing. I always thought that our festival, when it comes around and we have the ball tournaments, or all the events, but especially the ball tournaments, that we could have some type of, I always thought this, that we could have some type of live feed, that we could go out there and shoot it with a camera and then show it live stream, and then have, like you said, a couple of announcers talking Creek, talking Mvskoke about the ball game, like on ESPN, how they broadcast on ESPN like that, but do it in our language, I always thought that would have been a great idea. Hopefully we can look into that, but yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe that's an idea we do. You'll have to come visit us on the Friday, beginning of the festival. We usually do a live broadcast from
great,
from the
yeah.
grounds. We start at 10, go for an hour or so.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah.
Come on by and say, it's Jay. As we kind of chronicle the efforts there, I know we've sort of discussed it, but do you feel like we're sort of winning that battle a little bit at a time, if the only way to describe it, perhaps?
I do. I think teaching the language and having people get it is the hard part. But I think once they're inside and once they're involved, it gets easier for them because they perpetuate it. And I hope that we're winning. And you don't have to be a fluent speaker to say things. You could like you say, you could start with one word a day, or 2 words, or 3 words, or
A phrase.
a phrase. Your basic, everyday living things. Hand me a fork. It's time to get up and go to school. Short phrases, but if you perpetuate them, you'll get it. But yeah, I think we're making headway. We're getting a lot of people call the office for all types of reasons. Young men call and they say, well, how do you say such and such? And we'll tell them, and they say, well, I want to get a tattoo of that on my body with the language. I'm like, oh, okay, that's pretty neat, And so all these modern, and I know on my highest, Becky and Grace saying they text each other in Creek, the Mvskoke language, which is, to me, that's amazing to me to be able to do that. It's like a secret code or something, nobody, it's pretty neat actually. But.
Well, the Navajos fool the Japanese with it.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, sure thing.
All right, let me ask you for a little help there. One that I tried to learn and remember. If you're going to say "I love you" in Mvskoke, what phrase do you?
Oh, what is that? Ino gitchkes?
Gitch.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I actually wrote that down and kind of fumbled over pronunciation.
Yeah.
But Ramona, gitchkes.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's cool. Now we're going to wrap this up, but. If somebody has some interest in connecting with your program, or need a word or 2 translated, or just want to know more, how do they all get in touch with you?
Well, you can call the office at 918-732-7724, or drop us an email, or check out our Facebook page, Mvskoke Obanuga. There's multiple ways you can get a hold of us. We're always open to new ideas and new ways to get our language out there, and hopefully a renewed interest, and just keep this thing going, and get it bigger and bigger, and have community involvement in all areas and all levels, from the man on the street all the way up to the top. I think everybody needs to be able to say some things in the language, introduce yourselves in the language.
Get yourself fed.
Yeah. Say, even like when you're in a business meeting or you're out of town on business, how to say a meal prayer in your language out of state. Because people will ask you, if you're around other native, they'll say, can you say a prayer for us before we eat? And to be able to say that in your language is, to me, is a big deal,
Right. Yeah. They're going to say, thank you, God.
Absolutely,
Chafambachi. There we go.
Yeah.
All right, well, I tell you what, thank you, Brandon. Excuse me. I appreciate you coming in and spending time with you. I know you've got a lot of projects on your plate, so we wish you success in everything going on there. We can do anything else to help promote some of the stuff you're up to. Let me know, and we'll try and make it happen.
Great.
All right. We're going to take a short pause here and get away from the wind, and we'll be back with some of the opening arguments in the Supreme Court. So please stay with us here on Mvskoke Radio.
Who am I? Am I Indian? Just 'cause I'm a girl from the res, don't make things up about me. What if I move away? Then who am I? Some kids try meth just to escape, but then I think about my grandma, my little brother, my beadwork, my poetry, and I think, I like who I am, and I know meth is not for me.
Check out ncai.org, a message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Who am I? Am I native? I don't want people assuming things because I'm Indian. I just want to be me. But how do I live in two worlds? Some guys just check out by doing meth. But that ain't for me. Because I see my family, my friends, my drum making, my future. There are a lot of cool things about being who I am. And meth isn't one of them.
Learn more at ncai.org, a message from the Partnership for a Drug-Free America and the National Congress of American Indians.
Welcome back to Mvskoke Radio here. Now, we have excerpted some of the opening arguments in this Navajo versus United States and Arizona water rights case. Water is life, and we gotta have it now. They are arguing that it should have been included in their treaties, and the United States is saying, well, we don't have any responsibility for it. Where have we heard stuff like that? Now, I tell you what, enough of me. Let's just listen to it. And I know it is legalese, so please try and stay with it, and we'll keep our eye on this particular subject.
We will hear argument this morning in Case 21-1484, Arizona versus the Navajo Nation, and the consolidated case. Mr. Liu?
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court. When a reservation is established, that reservation isn't just the land. It's also a right to the timber on the land, a right to the minerals below the surface, and under winters, a right to water for the reservation. Each of those rights is a stick in the bundle that makes up the reservation, and when the Navajo Reservation was originally established and later expanded, the Navajo Nation got all of those sticks, and it still possesses them today. There's no dispute about that. The dispute here is about something different. Whether the United States owes the Navajo Nation a judicially enforceable affirmative duty to assess the tribe's water needs, develop a plan to meet them, and then carry out that plan by building water supply infrastructure on the reservation. The answer to that question is no. Just as the 1868 treaty didn't impose on the United States a duty to build roads or bridges, or to harvest timber, or to mine coal, the 1868 treaty didn't impose on the United States a duty to construct pipelines, pumps, or wells to deliver water. Those affirmative duties aren't part of the treaty, and because the government has never expressly accepted those duties, the Navajo Nation's breach of trust claim can't proceed. This is not to say that the United States doesn't have a moral and political responsibility to address the Navajo Nation's water needs. As part of the general trust relationship, Congress and the executive have secured for the Navajo Nation hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of water and over billions of dollars for infrastructure on the reservation. And in exercising its own sovereignty, the Navajo Nation is free to develop its own infrastructure projects, including by drilling water to access the cheapest source of water on the reservation, groundwater. What the Navajo Nation cannot do, however, is to impose on the United States a duty that the government has never expressly accepted. Accordingly, the judgment below should be reversed. I welcome the Court's questions.
Mr. Liu, would you just take a step back and address the jurisdictional issue, particularly with respect to redressability and this court's retention of jurisdiction on the Colorado River?
Sure. We don't view the issue as going to the district court's subject matter jurisdiction. We view it as a substantive merits determination about whether the relief that could be granted at the end of this suit would violate the substance of the decree that this court entered in Arizona versus California. So I think you'd have to look at the relief that could be ordered down the road and measure it against the decree. I think everyone at this point agrees that an order by the district court in this case that would order the delivery of water from the lower mainstream of the Colorado River to the Navajo reservation would violate the decree, because the decree places conditions on when such water can be delivered by the United States.
Where else would the water come from?
There's plenty of sources on the Navajo reservation. So if we're talking about the particular region of the Navajo reservation that's at issue in this complaint, the most accessible source of water on the reservation is groundwater. There are aquifers that lie beneath the reservation, and there's no impediment to the Navajo Nation accessing those water sources today. In fact, they're doing it across other parts of the reservation. Another source of possible water for this region is the upper basin, the Colorado River in the upper basin. That upper basin water is farther away than the lower Colorado mainstream, but it's far more accessible. And the reason why is if you look at the terrain of the lower Colorado mainstream that's adjacent to this part of the reservation, it is a steep canyon. The reservation is on a plateau, and then it's a 3,000 to 4,000 foot drop down the canyon to the lower Colorado River.
You said that water was farther away. How far away is it?
It still borders the reservation, but it's further north. It's just above Lee Ferry. The area we're talking about here is below Lee Ferry, so it's not much farther.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but how far away from the agricultural areas where water is needed?
Well, I think to be clear, the water needed here isn't for agricultural needs. If you read the complaint at JA 101 to 102, the needs there alleged aren't agricultural needs. They are domestic municipal needs. And I think that just highlights the mismatch between the needs here and the agricultural provisions that are relied upon in the 1868 treaty. The 1868 treaty provisions are about farming. They are about providing seeds and agricultural implements to the tribe in the original part of the reservation. The needs alleged in the complaint exist hundreds of miles away, and they're not even about agricultural needs. They're about needs for domestic and municipal consumption. If you look at the text of the treaty, and this is reproduced at 11A of our statutory appendix, the provisions at issue, this is Article 7 of the provision, they're about particular items, seeds and agricultural implements for a particular area, the tracts of land that were selected in the original reservation. They're for a limited period of time, up to 3 years, and they're for a particular amount, $100 the first year, $25 the second and third. The duty asserted here is about something else. It's about water. It's about water for a different part of the reservation, 100 miles away. It's about water for an ongoing and indefinite basis, not for a limited period of time. And the dollar amount, there's no limit. I think part of the problem, the separation of powers concerns that the claim raises, is that it's really unclear what the scope of the plan that the Navajo Nation envisions the United States will design will look like at the end.
Mr. Liu, I think you said that the Navajo Nation has, quote, hundreds of thousands of acre feet of water. Is that correct?
Correct.
Do you have a figure for how much water that is?
It is, well, an acre feet is how much water would fill up an acre of land
Sure.
for 1 foot.
Right.
And, we could do that.
But do you know how many hundreds of thousands? Do you know the amount of, has the United States calculated, or could you calculate water per capita?
I don't have water per capita, but to give you some examples, the San Juan settlement in New Mexico provides 37,000 acre feet annually. This covers 250,000 people over a 40-year time horizon. The appropriations associated with that are $1.9 billion. So that's sort of the magnitude. It's 300 miles of pipeline, 19 pumping plants, 2 water treatment facilities. So these are substantial facilities that the government, in furtherance of its general trust relationship, has agreed to provide. But
I understood that was part of the Navajo's argument in this case. In other words, you say here that you don't have calculations about water per capita, and I understood that their breach of trust claim was about that, was about the fact that the United States, they say, has not done what it needs to do as a trustee to determine what their water needs are.
And I would say that there's no duty, no specific duties found in the treaty that requires us to conduct that sort of analysis.
Mr. Liu, with respect to that, there are provisions in the treaty with respect to agriculture, a promise that this will be a permanent home and that there will be opportunity for raising animals, right?
Correct.
Is it possible to have a permanent home, farm, and raise animals without water?
No.
And could the United States dam the Little Colorado right above the reservation and prevent water from flowing into the reservation?
It could do that as a matter of fact.
Well, as a matter of fact.
Right.
But as
Not
a matter
legally.
of law, could it
No.
do that? No, because that would breach the treaty obligation, right?
If the tribe were making use of the water, then it would breach, it would interfere with their exercise of their winter's rights.
Okay, so clearly there is a duty to provide some water to this tribe under the treaty, right?
No.
Wait, hold on. What am I missing? We just agreed you can't dam the Little Colorado because that would breach the treaty.
Right.
That's water, right?
Correct.
So there's some obligation with respect to water in this treaty.
There is an obligation to respect their winter's rights, just as any other landowner would have to do. But the difference here is—
And there's an obligation to provide opportunities for a permanent home. Now, let's say as a matter of state contract, I promise you a permanent home, and that you'll be able to raise animals there, and you'll be able to conduct agriculture there. Would it not be a breach of contract to then provide a home where none of those things is possible? Is that a permanent home?
I think everyone agrees that the permanent homeland comes with the bundle of sticks that I said at the outset. One of those sticks is on—
If you just answer my question, could I bring a good breach of state contract claim for someone who promised me a permanent home, the right to conduct agriculture, and raise animals, if it turns out it's the Sahara Desert?
I don't think you would be able to bring a breach of contract claim.
Really?
I think—
You don't think that's a breach of good faith and fair dealing? You don't think at least it would state a claim?
I don't think so, and I'm happy to apply
If we
ordinary—
disagree with that, then what?
If
we found that might, under ordinary contract principles, state a claim,
right,
and that in fact many state courts have found such claims.
If this court thought the Hickory standard were satisfied, then there would be a judicially enforceable duty, and then we'd move on to the second step of the analysis.
And with respect to that second step, or maybe it's the first, I don't know, the jurisdictional question, you agree that the trust claim brought here is not the type of question that must be addressed before addressing whether the Navajo Nation has identified a judicially enforceable duty, right?
We don't think the jurisdictional issue needs to be addressed before. We don't think it's a jurisdictional issue, correct.
Mr. Liu, I guess I'm just not understanding the nature of your argument, so would you clarify it for me? You start by saying that the Indians have rights to water, and that they get them by virtue of having rights to land, having a reservation of this kind, and the rights to water just go along with that. Is that a matter of the treaty, or are you saying it's something else, that the rights arise some other way?
It is a matter of the treaty setting aside the land for the Indians. This is Article 2.
Okay, so if it's a matter of the treaty, if you read the treaty as giving rights to water, right? Because you could read the treaty and say, I don't see anything about water here.
Right.
There are no rights to water. But you're not reading the treaty that way. You're saying, look, when the treaty gives land, the treaty also says, implicit in that is that you have a right to the water that will enable you to live on that land. So then there seems to me to be a gap, because then you're saying, well, notwithstanding that the treaty gives water, that the treaty promises water, that's what treaties do. It's a contract that promises something. You're saying those rights are unenforceable. And I guess I don't understand, if the treaty promises water, where you get the idea that that is unenforceable.
No, the treaty does vest water rights in the tribe, and those rights are enforceable, including by the tribe. But the promise that we have allegedly breached here isn't about violating those rights. It's about violating affirmative duties to supply the water to the tribe.
Mr. Dvorsky?
Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the Court. The Senate ratified 2 treaties with the Navajo Nation. In the 1868 treaty, the United States promised the Navajos a permanent homeland. Both parties understood that in promising the Navajos their land, the United States was also promising them the water it needed to sustain life in the arid Southwest. Those treaties are specific sources of law that give the nation rights to water and impose duties on the government to secure that water. But for years, the United States has failed to fulfill that promise. Today, the average person on the Navajo reservation uses just 7 gallons of water a day. The national average is 80 to 100 gallons. The United States agrees that on paper, the nation has treaty rights to the water its people need. We're here because the United States says it doesn't have to do anything to secure the water it promised, even though the United States also says it speaks for the Navajos as trustee of the nation's water rights. When the United States blocked the nation from intervening in Arizona versus California, it said, quote, "The United States is authorized exclusively to represent the Indian tribes in litigation affecting their property rights, and its actions are, quote, binding upon those tribes." The states say we're here to take their water behind their back. No, the nation is here for its fair share through a fair process. The nation, not the states, was cut out of Arizona versus California by the federal government and left without water. The United States thinks that it alone decides whether it has made good on its promises, but that's not how promises work. A promise is a solemn duty, and the United States' duty is to see that the nation has the water it needs and the United States promised. The nation and its people know and feel the water shortage in the Southwest. The nation asks only that the United States, as trustee, assess its people's needs and develop a plan to meet them in consultation with the nation. I welcome the Court's questions.
If it were agreed that the only source of water was the lower Colorado, would your argument be the same?
It would. The United States.
As far as jurisdiction?
Yes, it would, because the relief that we are seeking here is an assessment of the nation's needs and a plan to meet them. If that plan, if that assessment ultimately calls for allocating additional water from the lower mainstream of the Colorado, the parties might well at that point need to return to this court. But the remedy that we are seeking from the district court does not require reallocating water in a way that would contravene this court's decree.
Have you, throughout this litigation, suggested any other source than the lower Colorado?
I don't believe we have, but it's also not our burden to do so. The United States has taken on the fiduciary obligation to ensure our winter's rights. The United States itself believes that it holds the winter's rights in trust. The very first step that it needs to take is to assess and figure out its plan for how those winter's rights will be satisfied and met. And so it is the United States' duty to figure out where that water ought to come from. But as has been discussed earlier, and as I think Mr. Liu acknowledges, there are other potential sources besides the Colorado, besides the lower mainstream, including the upper mainstream, the Zuni River, the San Juan River. There are other potential pertinent water sources that could supply water to the reservation.
Counsel, prior to the execution of the treaty, the Navajo were, of course, forcibly removed from their reservation to an area that they turned out were not able to grow crops on. And then the agreement with General Sherman, they were allowed to move back. Why isn't the permanent home feature a reference to that? In other words, they didn't want, again, to be moved off of their current home.
2 points, Mr. Chief Justice. One, I think permanent home has to be understood in light of how Winters understood that term, which is to include water that is necessary for life as a permanent homeland. But second, to get to the factual premise of your question, when the Navajos returned to a portion of their permanent homeland, they were returning under very different conditions than they had been there before. They would at that point, under the treaties, be under the protection and jurisdiction of the United States. They would no longer have free reign of the territory to be able to access water in the same way that they were before. They would no longer be able to leave the reservation in the same way that they were before. And so the situation had changed, and they were dependent on the government for access to water, just as they had been at Bosque Redondo, which in the unlivable conditions there.
The treaty specifically mentions a variety of things that would be necessary for agriculture. The 15,000 sheep, however many cattle, the seeds. If the water were, why wasn't the water mentioned? As your argument now is it's necessarily implicit, but the other things were spelled out. Wouldn't you have spelled out the water at the time?
Well, the other things were spelled out, and as you pointed out, Mr. Chief Justice, the other things were spelled out with numbers. They could be very specifically enumerated in that way. Water was something that was simply inherent in the permanent homeland and making it suitable both as a permanent homeland and for the very purpose of agriculture. As the court recognized in Winters, if you have a permanent homeland for agriculture, both of which were features of the reservation in Winters as well, if you have those things, you can't carry out the purpose of that agreement without also having water. And so it didn't need to be, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
No, it didn't need to be spelled out because it was an essential component of fulfilling the purposes of the agreement.
As I understand the government's argument, the government is not contesting that the treaty gives the Navajo Nation water rights. It's simply contesting what the nature of its own responsibility is with respect to those rights. So the question is, what duties attach to the government? And the government is saying the duty that attaches to it is that it can't interfere with the Navajo Nation's water rights, but it has no affirmative obligation to ensure that the Navajo Nation has a supply of water. And it seems to me that that's the difference between the two of you, not whether the treaty conveys a promise as to water. The government agrees that it does. The government is just saying it has no affirmative duty with respect to the supply of water. So what's your answer to that?
Justice Kagan, I think the government's conduct, both in Arizona versus California and in other cases, belies the notion that the treaty just gives the tribe a stick in a bundle to do with as it wishes. The government itself, its own conduct, shows that it believes it has affirmative duties. In Arizona versus California, the United States said that it spoke for the nation. More recently, in a January 2022 intervention motion in New Mexico litigation, the government said again, quote, "The United States is the legal owner of all water rights recognized for the Navajo Nation, holding these rights in trust for the Navajo Nation." So the United States is controlling these Winters rights, and in certain instances, like Arizona versus California, blocking the nation from asserting those rights for itself. So this is not a situation where the United States simply gave the nation a stick and said, here you go, use it. The United States continues to exercise control over that stick. And in doing so, the United States itself is recognizing that it has duties with respect to the water.
It seems to me like Winters rights are something different than tapping aquifers and helping come up with a plan or helping install pumps. I mean, are you arguing for those latter kinds of duties or just for Winters rights? Because it would be a different claim to say we have Winters rights and the government hasn't been asserting them on our behalf. They breached their trust obligation by blocking our intervention. That's a different kind of claim.
That's right. So let me be clear about what I think the scope of the Winters right is. The scope of the Winters rights includes access to sufficient water from pertinent water sources either within or along the border of the reservation. The United States has to ensure that access. We are not saying, as a matter of treaty interpretation, that the United States is legally obligated to pay for pipelines or aquifers or whatever. That whether the United States has a moral or political obligation to do that, as Mr. Liu acknowledged, I think it does. But in terms of the Winters rights under the treaty, that is really a right of access to an appurtenant water source.
So that's really just about intervening in litigation to assert those on the Navajos' behalf and to protect them. right? Like to safeguard those rights so that you're not deprived of them, as Justice Gorsuch was pointing out. The Navajo haven't had an opportunity in Arizona versus California or any other time to assert those winters rights and to have any rights in the mainstream adjudicated.
I think that's right, Justice.
Okay. And I mean, putting aside here like the whole question of the decree and whether you're trying to get rights to the mainstream, let's just take that part off the table. But really, one way to think about the breach of trust here, just to make sure that I'm clear, is that the United States failed to assert winters rights on your behalf and, in fact, blocked you from watching out for yourselves.
Well, that's right. I was going to emphasize the last part. Not only failed to assert, but in fact put us in a catch-22 by keeping us out of the Arizona versus California litigation.
Why wouldn't you try to intervene in that litigation now?
I think there would be very significant obstacles to doing that without the United States support, including the states would assert sovereign immunity objections that the United States could overcome, query whether the nation could overcome those on its own, and the United States is not exactly volunteering to help us even after all of this litigation in terms of reopening the litigation that we were blocked out of.
Doesn't the failure to assert also carry with it an obligation to evaluate to the extent that the government is claiming that it doesn't assert because it didn't think that you had or needs for water or whatnot? So I don't know that it's as narrow as just they breached the fiduciary obligation of not asserting, but they also have to figure out the circumstances under which assertion is required.
Well, of course, Justice Jackson, and I think that the key first step in figuring out what claims to assert is assessing what are the needs and how are those needs going to be met. And
so a breach of fiduciary duty claim could rest on the Navajos claiming you haven't even done the legwork to determine whether or not to assert our rights.
Absolutely, and the breach of fiduciary duty in that situation would be analogous to a failure to provide an accounting of what's in the trust. Before you can figure out how to actually manage the trust, whether to assert the winters rights in litigation, you have to figure out what is in the trust and what the needs of the trustee are.
Excerpts from the Supreme Court discussion, hearings on the Navajo versus United States versus Arizona, and whether or not the federal government has a role to play there. A few quick announcements here, and we'll be on our way. What's the date here? We're on the 22nd. We're down towards the end of the wild onion season. And next one coming up is going to be on April 1st in Springfield United Methodist Church in Okemah. And then there's 11 a.m. until they run out of wild onion dinner in Oklahoma City. But there's also March 25th, the Conchardi Church is putting on their wild onion dinner. And so you might want to make a trip there. Okay, some of the other events going on throughout Mvskoke country. On the 26th through the 29th, the Spring Revival at Belvin Baptist Church. Supper, evening services will be be served there. On April 3rd, 6 to 9, the Intertribal Hymn Singing. For more information, email raineaton at ou.edu. Okay, on March 25th, also, the Mvskoke Hymn Singing, dinner after singing, First Indian Baptist Church of Moore in Moore for from 3 to 5 there. Also, on April 29th, the Tulsa Creek Indian Community Spring Fling Arts and Crafts Sale seeking vendors. So if you're interested in that, you want to call them at 918-298-2464. Okay, Mvskoke Nation Scholarship Foundation has announced the opening of the fall scholarship application period. It awards dozens of scholarships to students each semester through various fundraising, and you may apply at http://creeknationfoundation.org scholarships. So that is open now until June 1st. Okay, and of course, the Mvskoke Creek Nation second annual arts show coming up Let's see, where are we here? April 22nd through the 23rd. So you might want to check that one out. That's a big one and certainly worth your while there on checking it out. Well, we want to thank you for listening to us today. I know that sometimes it's a little tough listening to legal discussions, but we hope that you got the essence of that out and understand what's going on there. It's so important for us to understand all of it. Next week, no. You've been listening to Mvskoke Radio. Join us again next week for more local, tribal, and community news and updates. Mvskoke.